The old man stood at the top of the attic stairs, his weathered hands gripping the railing, and looked at the room where he had spent the last 30 years of his life. The walls were lined with cardboard boxes. The floor was covered with stacks of newspapers, some yellowed with age, others still crisp and white. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a dim light over the chaos. This was not a room. This was a mind made visible. Theodore Vane, Theo to the few who knew him well, was 74 years old. His hair had gone gray 2 decades ago. His back had developed a permanent curve from decades of hunching over desks and workbenches. His clothes were old, his shoes were scuffed, and his hands bore the permanent stains of ink and coffee. He looked, by any objective measure, like a man who had not mattered for a very long time. His son, Elias, did not see it that way. Elias saw his father as an obstacle. Elias was 30, 8 years old, handsome in an aggressive way, with the restless energy of a man who had been told his whole life that he was special. He had graduated from a good university. He had started a tech firm that was, by all accounts, moderately successful. He had married a woman named Vanessa, who looked at his father the way one might look at a piece of furniture that did not match the decor. And now he wanted the attic. "Dad," Elias said from the bottom of the stairs, his voice dripping with the false patience of a man who had already made up his mind. "I gave you 24 hours. That was 12 hours ago." Theo did not turn around. "I know what you gave me. Vanessa wants to turn this space into a meditation suite. You know, for when we have guests from the city, it has good light, good energy." Elias paused. "You understand." Theo understood perfectly. For 30 years he had lived in this attic. He had paid for this house. He had bought it when Elias was just a boy using money he had earned from work that his son had never bothered to understand. The deed was in his name. The mortgage had been paid off a decade ago. But Elias had made it clear. The house was his now, or it would be as soon as Theo was gone. "You have a room at the retirement home," Elias continued. "I already sent the deposit. It is nice. They have bingo on Tuesdays." Theo finally turned. He looked down at his son, this tall, confident man in his expensive shoes and his tailored shirt, and felt something he had not felt in years. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. "I want what is best for everyone," Elias replied, "including you." Theo nodded slowly. He walked back into the attic and picked up a small leather bag. The same bag he had carried for 40 years, the same bag that had accompanied him to 3 continents and countless hotel rooms. He did not pack the newspapers. He did not pack the boxes. He packed only a few essential things: a change of clothes, a worn photograph of his late wife, and a single notebook. "Dad," Elias said, his voice sharpening, "the movers will be here tomorrow. Anything you leave behind is going in the dumpster." Theo paused at the top of the stairs. He looked back at the stacks of newspapers, the ones covered in his handwriting, his equations, his calculations. 30 years of work, 30 years of thinking, 30 years of solving problems that no one else in the world could solve. "I heard you," Theo said. He walked down the stairs, past his son, past the living room where Vanessa was pretending not to watch, past the front door that Elias had already started to think of as his own. He did not look back. The door slammed behind him. Elias watched his father walk down the driveway and disappear around the corner. The old man's shoulders were hunched, his step slow, his leather bag swinging at his side. He looked exactly like what he was, a tired old man with nowhere to go. Vanessa appeared at Elias's elbow. "Finally, I thought he'd never leave. The retirement home is perfectly adequate. Did he take his things?" Elias glanced up the stairs toward the attic. "He took his bag. The rest is trash. I'll call the junk removal service in the morning." "Good. I already ordered the meditation cushions. They're arriving on Thursday. That evening, Elias stood in the attic with a glass of whiskey in his hand, surveying his new domain. The bare bulb still hung from the ceiling, but he had already called an electrician to install recessed lighting. The floor was still covered in newspapers, but the movers would take care of that in the morning. He bent down and picked up one of the newspapers. It was an old edition of the Financial Times, at least 5 years old, covered in his father's cramped handwriting. Equations, diagrams, notes in the margins that made no sense to anyone but the old man. "Rubbish," Elias muttered. He tossed the newspaper onto a pile by the door. He picked up another, same thing, another, and another. Page after page of dense, impenetrable scribbling. His father had spent 30 years in this room, and this was what he had to show for it. A mountain of garbage that would take a week to haul away. Elias laughed. He had tried once to understand what his father was working on. When he was younger, more curious, he had asked questions. "What are you writing, Dad? What do all these numbers mean? Is this—" His father had always deflected. "Just thinking," he would say. "Just playing with ideas." Elias had stopped asking. He had assumed, like everyone else, that his father was simply eccentric. A retired teacher who had never quite let go of the classroom. A man who had accomplished nothing remarkable, who had faded into obscurity, who had spent his final years scribbling on old newspapers because he had nothing better to do. He took a sip of his whiskey and looked around the room. Tomorrow, it would be clean. Tomorrow, it would be empty. Tomorrow, the last trace of his father would be gone. He walked downstairs, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The knock came at 11 o'clock the next morning. Elias was in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reviewing quarterly reports on his tablet. Vanessa was at the gym. The house was quiet, peaceful, exactly as he wanted it. He opened the front door and found himself staring at a man who looked like he had stepped out of a magazine. The man was in his early 60s with silver hair and a face that radiated authority. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and probably cost more than Elias's car. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His watch, Elias noticed it immediately, was a Patek Philippe, the kind that cost more than most people's houses. Behind him, parked at the curb, was a black Maybach with tinted windows and diplomatic plates. "Elias Vane?" the man asked. "Yes," Elias said, straightening his posture. "My name is Marcus Thorne." The man extended a hand. His grip was firm, confident, the grip of someone who was used to being recognized. "I am the CEO of Thorne Infrastructure Group." Elias's heart skipped a beat. Thorne Infrastructure Group was a global giant, one of the largest construction and engineering firms in the world. They built bridges, tunnels, ports, and data centers. They had contracts with governments on 6 continents. They were, by any measure, a titan of industry, and their CEO was standing on Elias's doorstep. "Mr. Thorne," Elias said, his voice rising with excitement. "This is an honor. Please, come in. Can I get you some coffee, tea? I wasn't expecting." "I am not here for coffee," Marcus Thorne said. He stepped past Elias into the foyer, his eyes scanning the house with an intensity that made Elias nervous. "I am here for the manuscript." Elias blinked. "The manuscript?" "The old man," Marcus said. "The one who lives here. Where is he?" Elias felt a cold trickle of unease run down his spine. "My father? He is moved to a retirement home." "Why do you ask?" Marcus Thorne's face went pale. "Moved? When? Yesterday? He left last night." Marcus walked past Elias and headed toward the stairs. "Which room was his?" "The attic, but I don't understand." Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time. Elias followed, confused and increasingly alarmed. When they reached the attic, Marcus stopped in the doorway and stared at the piles of newspapers, the cardboard boxes, the chaos of a lifetime. "The newspapers," Marcus said. His voice was trembling, actually trembling. Where are his notes, his equations, his calculations? Elias gestured to the piles. "It is all here. I was going to have it hauled away this afternoon. It is just garbage." Marcus Thorne turned and looked at Elias with an expression that could only be described as horror. "Garbage?" Marcus repeated. "Do you have any idea what you are standing in?" Elias shook his head. Marcus walked to the nearest pile and picked up a newspaper. He studied the handwriting, the cramped, dense equations, and let out a breath that sounded almost like a prayer. "Your father," Marcus said slowly, "is the most brilliant mathematician and encryption specialist of his generation. 30 years ago, he developed the original encryption algorithm that Thorne Infrastructure has been using to secure its global communications. Without his work, our company would not exist. Not in its current form." Elias felt the floor shift beneath him. "What? He didn't patent it. He didn't sell it. He gave it to us for free, because he believed in what we were building. But the algorithm has evolved over the years. It has become more complex, and there are pieces of the final equation, the pieces that would allow us to upgrade our entire system, that only your father possesses." Marcus held up the newspaper. "These aren't scribbles, Mr. Vane. These are the blueprints for a billion-dollar technology. And if you are planning to throw them away, you are about to make the most expensive mistake in the history of this industry." Elias stood in the middle of the attic, surrounded by newspapers he had dismissed as trash, and felt the world rearrange itself around him. "Where is your father?" Marcus demanded. "I need to speak with him immediately." Elias opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't know," he admitted. "I didn't ask." It took Caleb, Marcus Thorne's head of security, less than 2 hours to find Theodore Vane. He was sitting on a bench in a small park, 3 blocks from the retirement home he had refused to enter. His leather bag was beside him. His hands were folded in his lap. He was watching the ducks in the pond, his expression calm and untroubled. The convoy arrived at 2:17 p.m. 10 black SUVs. That was not an exaggeration. 10 identical vehicles rolling down the narrow street in perfect formation, their tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun. They parked in front of the park, blocking traffic, drawing stares from everyone in sight. Marcus Thorne got out of the second vehicle. He was followed by 2 lawyers, 3 security specialists, and a woman carrying a leather briefcase that contained a contract worth more than Elias Vane would earn in his lifetime. Theo did not stand up. He did not smile. He simply looked at Marcus Thorne and said, "You found me, Mr. Vane," Marcus said, his voice reverent. "I apologize for the intrusion, but we have a problem that only you can solve." Theo nodded slowly. "I know. The encryption upgrade, the final equations. Without them, our entire system is vulnerable. We've been trying to reach you for months. Your phone was disconnected. Your email was inactive, we thought." "You thought I was dead," Theo finished. "Everyone does." Marcus had the decency to look ashamed. "Your son didn't tell us you had moved. He didn't tell us anything." Theo's eyes flickered toward the SUVs, toward the man standing awkwardly by the third vehicle, his face pale, his hands shoved into his pockets. Elias had come. He had followed the convoy, driving his own car, arriving just in time to see his father sitting on a park bench while the CEO of a global corporation practically genuflected before him. "Dad," Elias said, stepping forward. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Theo looked at his son, really looked at him. He saw the fear in Elias's eyes, not fear for his father, but fear for himself, fear of what he had lost, fear of what he had thrown away. "Didn't know what?" Theo asked. "That the old man in the attic might be worth something after all?" Elias flinched. Theo stood up. He picked up his leather bag and slung it over his shoulder. He walked past his son, past the lawyers, past the security specialists, and stopped in front of Marcus Thorne. "I have the equations," Theo said. "All of them, they're in my notebooks. The ones my son was planning to throw in the dumpster." Marcus let out a breath of relief. "Thank God, but I am not giving them to you for free." Marcus nodded. "Name your price." Theo turned and looked at Elias one more time. His son's face was a mask of desperation. He understood, now, what he had done. He understood that the old man he had dismissed, the dirty old man with his scribbles and his newspapers, held the keys to a fortune. "I don't want money," Theo said. "I want my house back." Elias's mouth fell open. "Dad, I want the attic," Theo continued. "I want the room where I've lived for 30 years. I want my newspapers and my notebooks and my boxes. And I want my son to understand that he doesn't get to decide when I am no longer useful." Marcus Thorne looked at Elias. His expression was cold, clinical, the expression of a man who had just calculated the exact value of the person standing in front of him. "The house is in your father's name," Marcus said. "He doesn't need our help to reclaim it. But if he wants to sell it—" "I am not selling," Theo interrupted. "I am staying," Marcus nodded. "Then we have a deal. The equations for your attic. And one more thing." "What is that?" Marcus smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Your son's company. Thorne Infrastructure has been a silent investor in his tech firm for the past 3 years. We provided the seed funding. We backed his loans. We guaranteed his credit lines." Elias went white. "What?" "Your father asked us to invest," Marcus said. "He didn't want you to know. He wanted you to succeed on your own terms without the weight of his reputation." He paused. "But after what you did to him, throwing him out, calling his life's work garbage, I've decided to review our investment." Elias staggered backward. You can't just—" "I can," Marcus said. "And I will. Effective immediately. Thorne Infrastructure is withdrawing all financial support from Vane Technologies. You have 60 days to find new funding. Good luck." He turned back to Theo. "Mr. Vane, my car is waiting. Shall we discuss the terms of our agreement?" Theo nodded. He walked toward the lead SUV, his leather bag swinging at his side. He did not look back at his son. He did not say goodbye. Behind him, Elias Vane stood alone in the middle of the street, watching his father climb into a vehicle that cost more than his entire company, and understood for the first time in his life what real power looked like. It did not wear expensive suits. It did not drive fancy cars. It sat in an attic for 30 years, scribbling on old newspapers, waiting for the world to catch up. Theo moved back into the house that evening. He did not gloat. He did not lecture. He simply walked up the stairs to the attic, set down his leather bag, and looked around at the room that had been his sanctuary for 3 decades. The newspapers were still there. The boxes were still there. The bare bulb still hung from the ceiling. Everything was exactly as he had left it. Elias stood in the doorway, his face a mask of humiliation. Vanessa had already packed her bags and left, not because she was angry, but because she had married Elias for his money, and it had just become clear that the money was gone. "Dad," Elias said. His voice was small. "I am sorry." Theo sat down on his old chair. He picked up a newspaper and uncapped a pen. "I am sure you are," Theo said. He remembered the coldness in his voice when he had said, 24 hours. He remembered the slam of the door. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. It was plain white, unmarked. "Take this," Theo said, handing it to Elias. Elias opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a legal document signed and notarized. "What is this?" Elias asked. "It is my revised will," Theo said. "I had Eleanor Thorne, Marcus's legal counsel, draw it up this afternoon." Elias's hands trembled as he read the document. His name appeared exactly once, in the section that disinherited him. The house goes to a charitable foundation, Theo said. The same foundation that will receive the royalties from my encryption patents. The same foundation that will continue to fund research in mathematics and computer science. Elias looked up. His eyes were "You are leaving me nothing." Theo nodded. "I am leaving you exactly what you gave me. Nothing. But I am your son." "You were my son," Theo said quietly. "And I raised you to be a lion, but I forgot to teach you the most important lesson of all." "What is that?" Theo set down his pen and looked at Elias with eyes that held no anger, no bitterness, no regret. Only a deep, quiet sadness. "Real value isn't about what something looks like," Theo said. "It is about what it is. You looked at my newspapers and saw trash because you couldn't see past the surface. You looked at me and saw an old man because you couldn't imagine that I might have something to offer." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "The house is yours, Elias. I am not taking it back. You wanted it so badly. Now you can have it. But you'll be paying the mortgage on your own from now on. The foundation is withdrawing its support. Every loan, every credit line, every financial guarantee I made through Thorn Infrastructure, it is all gone." Elias's face crumpled. "You are ruining me." "I am not ruining you," Theo said. "I am letting you become the man you always wanted to be, the man who doesn't need his father's help, the man who can stand on his own." He walked to the door and paused. "I'll be in the attic if you need me, but I suspect you won't. You never did." He climbed the stairs, walked into his room, and closed the door behind him. Elias Vane did not lose everything. He was too smart for that. Too resourceful. He found new investors, rebuilt his company, and eventually made something of himself. But he never forgot the lesson his father taught him on that autumn afternoon. He never forgot the look on Marcus Thorne's face when he had asked about the manuscript. He never forgot the sound of his father's quiet voice, saying, "Real value isn't about what something looks like. It is about what it is." And he never ever threw away another newspaper without reading it first. Theodore Vane lived in the attic for 5 more years. He finished his equations. He patented his encryption algorithm. He donated the royalties to charity. And every evening, he sat by the window, watching the sunset, scribbling on old newspapers, perfectly content in the knowledge that he had finally taught his son the lesson he should have taught him long ago. You cannot judge a man by his shoes. You cannot measure a mind by its surroundings. And you should never ever assume that the quiet person in the corner has nothing to offer. Because sometimes the most valuable things in the world are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize them.